Hey, what's up, everybody? This is B. Howard. It seems a lot of people are speaking on my behalf. I've never self-proclaimed to be Michael Jackson's son. I'm definitely not suing the estate. I've been taken care of very well, and also, I make my own cash.
Brandon Howard was just trying to make music, trying to live a normal life under an abnormal shadow, the shadow of the most famous entertainer the world has ever known. For years, people questioned the resemblance. The voice, the moves, the face.
The DNA test results came in and it says 99.9% DNA match that B. Howard is Michael Jackson's son.
They said it had to be a coincidence, but beneath it all was a truth too dangerous to speak and too painful to know. And when he finally found the courage to seek it out for himself, what he uncovered didn't just confirm the rumors, it destroyed everything he thought he knew about his own life. Just now, B. Howard cuts all ties after a DNA test reveals he's Michael Jackson's love child. A familiar face in the crowd. For years, Brandon Howard moved quietly through the R&B world, a talented singer-songwriter carving out a name on his own terms. To most, he was just another rising artist, one among many striving to break through. But then, something about him caught fire on social media. Something beyond just his music. It started with his face, the sharp cheekbones, the defined jawline, the unmistakable eyes, windows that seemed to carry the shadow of a legacy few could place, but many recognized instinctively. It wasn't just the features. The whispers began almost immediately. Is that Michael Jackson's son? The comparison was relentless, especially among die-hard MJ fans who scrutinized every detail. Brandon's movements were uncanny, fluid, precise, and full of the subtle nuances that defined the king of pop's stage presence. But Brandon never put on a show of imitation. His voice carried a similar timbre, a breathy, emotive quality that recalled MJ's own vocal style. Yet it was undeniably his own. This wasn't mimicry, it was inheritance. As videos of Brandon performing exploded across platforms, the comment sections transformed into confessionals. Fans debated late into the night, piecing together his mannerisms, the way he tilted his head when singing, how he smiled shyly yet confidently, all signature MJ trademarks. Award shows and red carpet moments only added fuel to the fire. Industry observers began to note how Brandon's demeanor reflected a rare blend of humility and star power, something that seemed almost genetic. Despite all the speculation, Brandon remained silent. He never confirmed nor denied the rumors. His guardedness only stoked curiosity. For years, this silence became a cloak that intensified the mystery, turning him from a promising artist into a figure of fascination, as if he were walking proof of a secret kept just out of public reach. A childhood wrapped in secrets. Brandon Alexander Howard entered the world in 1981, cradled in the arms of a music legacy that few truly understood. His mother, Mickey Howard, was a celebrated voice in R&B, known for her sultry vocals and emotional depth. But behind the scenes, her path had intersected closely with the Jackson family's world. At one point in her career, Joe Jackson, the relentless and complex patriarch who shaped Michael and his siblings, had taken a hand in guiding her early trajectory. The significance of this connection was buried in whispers. To outsiders, Mickey was a star in her own right. But to those who knew the industry's inner circles, it hinted at ties far deeper and more tangled than simple professional alliances. For Brandon, this meant growing up in a world where music was life, but where the boundaries between family and business were blurred beyond recognition. His childhood was spent in liminal spaces, behind velvet ropes at private parties, in backstage wings where legends exchanged knowing glances, in quiet rooms where conversations never made it to the tabloids. He was dressed impeccably, trained in music and dance from a young age, and groomed to carry a legacy. Yet, the question that shadowed every milestone remained. Who was his father? Those around him rarely spoke his father's name. When Brandon asked, the answers were evasive, a shrug here, a nervous glance there. Sometimes they hinted at Mickey's past relationships. Sometimes they dismissed the question entirely. The secrecy was palpable. Brandon grew up with a void where his paternal identity should have been, surrounded by adults who seemed to know the truth, but chose silence instead. That silence became a weight on his shoulders, a mystery whose pieces were scattered like fragments of a broken mirror. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that this wasn't just a missing name. It was a secret carefully protected by an unspoken code, a truth that could shake the foundations of everything he knew about himself and his place in music history. The Billie Jean Theory. The year was 1983. Michael Jackson, already a global icon, dropped Billie Jean, a track that would become an anthem, a mystery, and a cultural touchstone all at once. The song told the story of a woman who claimed he had fathered her child, a claim Michael vehemently denied in interviews. On the surface, it was just another pop narrative, a cautionary tale spun from experience and imagination. But beneath that catchy bass line and the moonwalk moves lay a whispered undercurrent that wouldn't fade. Just 2 years earlier, in 1981, Brandon Alexander Howard was born to Mickey Howard, an accomplished R&B singer known to her friends as Billie. The timing wasn't lost on fans and insiders alike. The connections were subtle but persistent. Michael and Mickey both moved in the rarefied air of the music industry's elite. They shared the stage at award shows, collaborated with some of the same producers, and were frequently seen in overlapping social circles. Over time, their friendship deepened from professional camaraderie into something more personal, at least according to the whispers that circulated quietly among industry insiders. This whisper grew into a theory, whispered first in backstage corners, then on fan forums, and eventually blossomed into a full-fledged urban legend. Fans began to wonder, was Billie Jean more than a story? Was it a coded confession? Was Mickey Billie Howard the real woman behind the lyrics? The theory was bolstered not just by timing, but by eerie similarities. Brandon's striking resemblance to Michael, not just in appearance, but in voice timbre, vocal phrasing, and musical sensibility. When Brandon started gaining attention in the early 2000s, critics and fans alike noticed his uncanny vocal inflections, his dance style, and even his stage presence that echoed the king of pop. Journalists, always hungry for a juicy story, began piecing together timelines, poring over photo archives. Old pictures surfaced showing Brandon and Michael at the same events, sharing smiles, exchanging gestures that felt like more than casual acquaintance. Fans dissected videos frame by frame, noting Brandon's subtle mimicry of Michael's hand movements, posture, and even his signature spins. Some obsessives even compared handwriting samples, pointing to strange parallels in script style between Brandon and Michael's documented writing. Yet despite the growing tide of speculation, Brandon himself remained enigmatic. Unlike the headline-hungry media, he neither embraced nor denied the theory publicly. His responses were carefully measured, sometimes distant, sometimes weary. The weight of a legacy he never asked for was pressing down, stapling expectations and assumptions to his very identity. But there was a private struggle behind his guarded gaze. When he caught his reflection in mirrors or the lens of a camera, he often saw the echo of a man whose shadow stretched longer than his own life. The question of identity lingered, unanswered but undeniable. The test that changed everything. Fast forward to 2014. The internet had evolved into a sprawling, unpredictable beast, ready to consume, amplify, and often distort the most sensational news. Into this digital maelstrom came an announcement that sent shockwaves around the globe. A Beverly Hills dental surgeon named Dr. Joseph Goodman claimed to possess a piece of Michael Jackson's DNA, extracted from a dental device purchased at an auction, and had allegedly tested it against a sample from Brandon Howard. The result? A 99.9% match. The claim was staggering. Michael Jackson had a secret son. News outlets exploded with headlines. Social media was ablaze with speculation, hashtags, and trending topics. Suddenly, Brandon's life was no longer his own. He was the center of a media storm, a living link to a secret history no one expected to confirm. For the first time, the rumor that had simmered for decades erupted into the public eye with an explosive force. But as quickly as the story rose, doubts crept in. The lab supposedly responsible for verifying the DNA results publicly denied any involvement. Medical professionals questioned the validity of the sample source, the chain of custody, and the methodology used. Industry insiders grew skeptical, pointing out that Dr. Goodman's prior ventures often flirted with controversy and viral publicity stunts. The man spearheading the media blitz, entrepreneur Alki David, was notorious for orchestrating dramatic, headline-grabbing spectacles, and many wondered if this was just another such stunt. Under mounting scrutiny, the narrative began to unravel. Brandon distanced himself from the test, clarifying that he had never authorized it, had no interest in legal battles against the Jackson estate, and was not seeking fame through manufactured drama. The backlash, however, was swift and damaging. Critics branded him a publicity seeker, dismissing his artistry and sincerity. The pressure forced Brandon into retreat, a hiatus from public life that lasted years. Yet beneath the surface, something profound had shifted. The DNA test, flawed and disputed as it was, planted a seed of urgent curiosity within Brandon. The external noise faded, but a private, quiet need took root: to know the truth for himself, on his own terms, away from the cameras and headlines. This internal struggle marked the beginning of a long personal journey, one that would shape his identity, his art, and his very understanding of family. The mother who wouldn't answer. Miki Howard, for years a respected name in R&B circles, had long maintained a dignified privacy around her personal life. But when the storm broke, the DNA test alleging a link to Michael Jackson's bloodline, she found herself thrust unwillingly into the spotlight. The interview with Essence magazine was her first public response, and it was a study in cautious deflection and guarded emotion. Her voice was steady, yet tinged with palpable hurt. She began by categorically denying any knowledge of the DNA test before it was announced, insisting that she had been blindsided by the news. The narrative presented to the world, that she had hidden a child from Michael Jackson, was something she rejected with quiet intensity. "I love my son," she said, "and I have nothing to hide." Yet beneath the surface, her words were carefully measured, a dance between truth and omission. The real story, however, lay in what she refused to say. When pressed on whether she and Michael had ever been involved beyond a professional friendship, Miki's answers became vague, evasive. She skirted around timelines, dodged direct confirmations, and repeatedly circled back to the sanctity of her relationship with her son, Brandon. Her eyes welled with tears when the interviewer pressed on her past, the topic evidently dredging up old wounds. In a moment of unguarded emotion, she referred to herself as Brandon's father, a declaration layered with complex meaning. It was a powerful acknowledgement of the role she had played alone, raising a child in a world filled with whispers and shadows. Pride radiated from her tone, yet it was intertwined with fear, not fear of exposure, but fear of what the revelation could unravel. For Brandon, seeing that interview was a mirror. It reflected his deepest suspicions, that there was something, a secret so weighty, that even his mother struggled to confront it openly. It was a silent admission that the story was far more complicated than any headline could capture, a legacy complicated by love, secrecy, and unspoken pain. A legacy too valuable to complicate. After Michael Jackson's death in 2009, his estate quickly became one of the most valuable in entertainment history. What had once been a financial tangle of debts and legal battles transformed into a sprawling empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The meticulously managed rights to his music catalog, image, unreleased tracks, and brand were locked behind layers of legal and financial safeguards, controlled by a team of shrewd executors and advisors who prioritized preservation and growth above all else. This empire was fragile, not in its wealth, but in its carefully maintained public narrative. Scandal, especially involving heirs previously unknown or unacknowledged, had the potential to shake that foundation to its core. The idea that Brandon could be recognized as a legitimate heir was a threat, a disruption that might trigger expensive court battles, open old wounds, and fracture the family's carefully curated legacy. Many insiders whispered that the silence from the Jackson camp was not born out of denial of truth, but rather strategic necessity. To publicly acknowledge Brandon as part of the family would mean rewriting history, shifting the distribution of an empire that was already a tightly contested prize. It would mean upheaval, something the estate, and perhaps the family, could ill afford. Publicly, the Jackson siblings' reactions ranged from dismissive to hostile. Taj Jackson, fiercely protective of the family's image, branded the DNA test a scam, decrying it as a ploy for attention or money. Jermaine Jackson went further, calling the claims outright fraudulent. LaToya Jackson's actions were more ambiguous. She was photographed with Brandon, yet she never offered public comment, leaving the world to speculate on her true stance. In the eyes of the estate, Brandon was an inconvenient shadow, a question mark better left unanswered. For the global fanbase, he became a subject of curiosity, a potential new chapter in Michael's complex story that few dared to fully explore. And for Brandon himself, caught between worlds, he remained an enigma, seeking identity, belonging, and the truth of a legacy that seemed simultaneously within and beyond his reach. The second test. The weight of years pressing down like a silent storm finally broke in early 2025. Brandon Howard, no longer content with whispers, rumors, and the relentless noise of speculation, made a profound choice. He would confront the mystery head-on, but this time on his own terms. The world's prying eyes would not dictate the narrative. This journey was personal, an urgent quest for truth buried beneath decades of silence and half-truths. Brandon knew the stakes. The first DNA test years prior had only unleashed more questions, a cacophony of doubt and unwanted spotlight. This time he approached with caution and resolve, reaching out not to the media or the rumor mills, but to a figure cloaked in discretion, a former physician who had once been intimately involved in Michael Jackson's private medical circle. This doctor was known for his professionalism, his unwavering confidentiality, and his deep knowledge of Michael's health archives. The test itself was orchestrated with surgical precision. DNA samples were obtained from an archival medical source, a specimen preserved and safeguarded through layers of legal validation. This wasn't a hastily gathered swab or an unverified saliva sample. It was one of the last authenticated remnants of Michael Jackson's biological history, carefully cataloged and preserved before his untimely death. Every step of the testing procedure was overseen by legal representatives, forensic experts, and notarized to ensure absolute integrity. The files, the note, the lie. What accompanied the test results went beyond mere biology. Alongside the official report was reportedly an unexpected artifact, a small, carefully sealed envelope bearing what is believed to be Michael Jackson's unmistakable personal mark. It was a gesture unlike any other, a cryptic message from a man who had spent his life surrounded by silence and guarded truths. Inside the envelope was a credit card, allegedly embossed with Michael's signature, along with a handwritten note. The card was said to be more than just a symbol of wealth or status. Sources familiar with the arrangement suggest it was intended as a key to something far more intimate. According to these sources, Michael had entrusted this card to his physician with one explicit instruction. It was to be handed over to his biological child, the one person Michael reportedly wished to acknowledge quietly and privately, long after his passing. The realization was devastating. Brandon had not merely been excluded from a family secret, he was allegedly deliberately erased, a casualty of preservation and control. The identity of his father, once a distant speculation, now stood as an undeniable truth. Yet, this truth arrived wrapped in a lie so carefully crafted it is said to have shadowed his entire life. Behind the scenes, decades of silent deals and shadowed arrangements are believed to have come into focus. Brandon reportedly learned that Joe Jackson, Michael's father and patriarch of the family, had allegedly orchestrated a web of confidentiality, coercing Mickey Howard into silence. Contracts and non-disclosure agreements are said to have been drafted, signed, and enforced to protect the Jackson legacy and the careers intertwined with it. Even Mickey herself is alleged to have once signed such a document, not revealing it to Brandon, but affirming to the family that the truth would remain buried. In this quiet, private moment, Brandon is said to have understood the true cost of legacy and silence. The public might never know the full story, but he did. And with that knowledge came a new path, one that demanded healing, reckoning, and perhaps, finally, peace. In the immediate aftermath of the DNA revelation, Brandon Howard reportedly vanished from the public eye, retreating into a silence so profound it reportedly startled even those closest to him. The whispers and rumors that had swirled for years, once dismissed as mere speculation, were now confronted with what many considered undeniable evidence. The theory that haunted him was no longer just a shadow. It had seemingly crystallized into bloodline truth. Yet, rather than feeling victorious or validated, those who saw him privately described a man burdened by pain and a crushing sense of abandonment. Sources close to Brandon have alleged that in moments of solitude, he repeatedly murmured a single phrase, not as a triumphant declaration, but as a lament: "I am his son." This was not the triumphant resolution many outside had imagined. It was a wound reopened, a betrayal that cut deeper than any headline could reveal. For decades, Brandon had reportedly lived on the periphery of a legacy that seemingly prioritized the interests of millions over the rights of one child to know the truth. The Jackson estate, his mother Mickey Howard's circle, and even extended family allegedly chose silence, shrouding his existence in omission and denial. He reportedly made no attempts to contact Michael Jackson's estate, nor did he reach out to the Jackson family members. Even the woman who had raised him, Mickey Howard, reportedly remained unacknowledged by Brandon. It was as if the revelation had severed not only a biological connection, but also a fractured emotional tether. To Brandon, this truth was both a burden and a condemnation, proof of a lifetime spent in shadows, denied acknowledgement, and gaslit by the very people who could have offered solace. The final severing. The culmination of years of emotional turmoil reportedly came swiftly and decisively. On a single day in early 2025, Brandon is said to have legally changed his name, shedding the Howard surname that had long tied him to a past he reportedly no longer wished to carry. This was not just a legal formality but a symbolic act, a reclamation of identity and a public statement of autonomy. In the days that followed, sources suggest he methodically erased his digital footprint. Every social media account is believed to have been deleted, with every trace of his public persona reportedly scrubbed clean. Contracts and agreements tied to his music career, many thought to have been established under the shadow of the Jackson name, were formally revoked. He is understood to have severed all professional ties with agents, managers, and representatives, especially those purportedly connected in some way to either the Jackson or Howard families. One of the most poignant acts was the dissolution of a foundation he had quietly planned, an initiative intended to honor Michael Jackson's memory, which Brandon allegedly chose to terminate. This gesture is widely interpreted as reflecting a man wrestling with grief, disillusionment, and the heavy cost of knowing the truth. Privately, Brandon is said to have confided to a select few that he would no longer entertain questions or engage with anything concerning the Jackson estate, Michael's legacy, or even his mother's history. His response was reportedly not born from bitterness or anger, but from a profound sense of mourning the family he is believed never to have truly had, and the years lost to secrecy and silence. For decades, Brandon sought to understand who he was, attempting to reconcile fragments of identity scattered by absence and denial. Now that the truth had been laid bare, many close to him felt the price was too steep to continue living in the shadow of a legacy that never fully embraced him. He did not walk away for financial gain. He did not walk away for media attention or headlines. He walked away because the truth itself was never the problem. It was the denial of that truth, the years of being kept in the dark, the isolation, and the erasure that is believed to have broken him. If your entire life had been built on a lie, would you fight for answers or walk away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.